Hello friends, welcome to my channel. In this video I am going to discuss about Mathew Arnold theory of poetry. As I have already discussed his writing style and discuss his poem as well, Dower Beach. We'll discuss his theory of poetry, which is very important to discuss here. So let's begin. Mathew Arnold, right? He was very renowned critics of 19th century, and he is also regarded as father of modern English criticism as well. So his literary works in critics are very important. Start with his preface to poems in published in 1853, which is very important piece in literary criticism as well, right? And apart from that, his writing, we will see classicism as well, right? And he was also a professor of poetry, and his views on grand poetic style. He regarded poetry as something criticism of life. We will discuss that as well. So he was a classicist, right, who loved art, literature and Hellenic culture, and so he tried to restore that grand style of poetry, right, and give his theory of poetry, his own theory of poetry. So we will discuss that. So his most famous piece of literary criticism is his essay The Study of Poetry, which is very important in literary criticism or in the world of criticism, where he talks about poets' high destiny, and he believed that mankind will discover that we have to turn poetry to interpret life for us, to console us and to sustain us. So for many, the poetry just only mean to purpose of poetry. For some people, they just consider it only to entertain or give pleasure, but for him poetry has purpose, right? And that is to interpret life for us, console us and sustain us. And he had a definite aim in writing poetry. So he believed in didactic purpose of poetry, not in only art for art's sake. He didn't believe that, but he believed that the purpose of art or the poetry is to give a lesson. It was criticism of life. Poetry is criticism of life, and he meant that, which mean that poetry is something noble and profound application of ideas of life. And he said that poetry serves as a greater purpose, right? And didactic purpose of poetry, as I already told you. And best poetry for Arnold, what is the best poetry for Arnold is the poetry which gives criticism of life, right? And about which abide by or which follow the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty. And what is meant by that? Poetic truth means that representation of life in true way, realism, right? And second one is poetic beauty, and which means the manner and style of poetry. So he said that poet should be a man with enormous experience, just as said by Wordsworth as well. Wordsworth also believed that a poet, he defined poet, right, as someone having grand knowledge, right, profound knowledge. So he also believed that poet should be a man with enormous experience, right? His intellect should be highly developed by enormous reading and deep critical thinking. And as I already been discussed, he believed in didactic purpose of poetry. The purpose of poetry is to give a moral lesson, moral view of poetry. He said that poetry should deal with the ideas, not with the facts, right? And what are that ideas? The ideas that should be moral, that meant to give a moral lesson. and moral should not be taken in narrow sense. He said that the poetry of revolt against life and a poetry of indifference towards moral idea is a poetry of indifference towards life. So this quotation is important, right? Where it is, theory of poetry, I lost the line, and here we go. His moral view, yes, his moral view that meant to give a moral lesson, right? And further, Arnold Philistinism. So he gives his philosophical ideas, right, in the field of philosophy and aesthetics. This term Philistinism, this describes the manner, habit, and character of a person whose anti-intellectual social attitude undervalues and despises art, beauty, spirituality, and intellect. Or you can say that Philistinist is a person who dislike art, right? Art, literature, and things like that. So a Philistine is a person of smugly narrow mind and of conventional morality, whose moralistic views and taste indicate a lack and indifference to aesthetic values. The someone we can define Philistine as someone, a person who is anti-intellectualism, right? So this is his theory about poetry, and so I have discussed our beach complete analysis as well. So thank you for watching.